Welcome to The Explainer. Grab your economic analyst hats because today we're diving into a high stakes briefing on a quiet crisis hitting millions of Americans every single year. When we think about getting injured, our minds usually go straight to physical pain, doctors, and maybe some physical therapy. But today, we're peeling back the curtain to look at the hidden and frankly, often devastating financial reality of recovery. Okay, let's dive right into this. When your health fails, who actually pays the bill? That is the central mystery we're unraveling right now. When a working professional faces complete financial ruin during a medical recovery, is that just a personal failure, a failure to budget and save? Or does it expose a massive systemic failure where the mathematical odds are just completely stacked against the average worker from day one? To figure this out, we've got a clear roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll look at the responsibility debate. Second, we're going to zoom in on a micro case study. Third, we'll map out the economic domino effect. Fourth, we'll zoom way out to look at the macro burden. And finally, number 5, we'll answer the big question. Is this a personal or systemic failure? All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the responsibility debate. So there are generally 2 major schools of thought when an unexpected medical crisis hits. On one side, you've got this expectation of personal financial preparedness. Basically, the idea that responsible adults should just have robust emergency savings ready to go. But on the flip side, we have the very harsh reality of skyrocketing healthcare costs and systemic failures. So the big question we have to weigh as we dig into the data today is this. Is it mathematically fair to expect individuals to just outsave massive, prolonged recovery costs? Moving right along to Section 2, the micro case study, let's test that personal responsibility theory. Now, what's really interesting about this is how incredibly fast a responsible safety net can just evaporate. Meet Lisa. She's 48, pulls in about $65,000 a year as an office manager, and honestly, she did everything right. She had a really healthy 15 grand saved up for emergencies, barely any credit card debt, but then a severe back injury hits. Fast forward just one single year, her income drops to $42,000 because she just can't work as much. Her savings completely wiped out, down to just $2,000. Her credit card debt absolutely skyrockets to 12 grand, and those retirement contributions she was making completely suspended. To really wrap our heads around how a savings account drains that quickly, we have to look at the ledger logic of a typical recovery budget. Sure, you've got those heavy medical costs, imaging, surgery deductibles, physical therapy, all the equipment, which totals roughly $12,100. But here is the kicker. You have to factor in the hidden cost that completely eclipses those standard medical bills. I'm talking about $15,000 in lost wages, just from taking 3 months off work to heal. So you add that up, and the total financial hit for the year is over $27,000. And that brings us to the absolute pivot point of this whole briefing. Think about this for a second. The greatest cost of an injury is often not the medical bill. It's the income that literally disappears while the recovery is taking place. This stark reality completely shifts the blame. It moves it away from personal budgeting gaps and squarely onto structural realities. Because let's face it, when the paychecks stop, even the absolute best financial safety nets are going to tear. Which brings us to Section 3, the economic domino effect. Because an injury is rarely just a biological event. And this brilliantly illustrates what I call the unforgiving mathematical equation of housing stress. It goes like this. Step 1. A health crisis hits. That instantly triggers Step 2, lost income. Naturally, without income, we hit Step 3, savings are completely depleted. So to just survive, people turn to Step 4, putting everything on credit cards. And when those cards max out, boom, Step 5, housing instability. A homeowner who is comfortably paying a $2,200 mortgage suddenly faces default. The crazy thing here is this housing crisis wasn't caused by the housing market. It was caused by a health event. Just think about how this timeline actually plays out in real life. Day 1 is the injury and those initial medical costs. Weeks 1 through 4, that brings the time off work and this sudden, terrifying shock of lost income. By the time you hit months 2 to 6, you're facing severe ongoing financial pressure from mounting bills and just trying to buy groceries. And by year 1 and beyond, you are looking at serious long-term wealth reduction. Because honestly, financial recovery notoriously takes way longer than physical recovery. Fighting with insurance, scheduling appointments, managing chronic pain, it essentially becomes this exhausting, unpaid second job. Let's zoom out now for Section 4, the macro burden. We're going from Lisa's individual savings wipeout to something much bigger. $560 to $635 billion. Seriously, let that massive number sink in for a second. According to the National Institutes of Health, that is the estimated annual economic cost of chronic pain in the United States alone. We're talking healthcare expenses, disability, lost productivity, and people literally dropping out of the workforce. This paints such a powerful picture when you put it next to the limits of an individual savings account. You simply cannot outsave a crisis of this sheer macroeconomic scale. So the crucial point here is how this compares to the conditions we hear about in the news every single day. Chronic pain costs the U.S. economy up to $635 billion annually. That silently but completely dwarfs the economic destruction of diabetes at $327 billion, cancer at $243 billion, and heart disease at $239 billion. It's this massive, heavy drag on our entire national economy, yet it gets just a fraction of the public attention. And the direct burden on everyday consumers is just as staggering. $88 billion. That represents the massive mountain of medical debt sitting on Americans' credit reports right this very minute. Roughly 100 million Americans carry some form of medical debt, and here's the wild part. Many of them actually have health insurance. This kind of debt drags down credit scores, it completely stifles consumer spending, and it heavily suppresses the broader national economy. Now, if you're wondering how those numbers get so astronomically high, just think about the population breakdown. Nearly 1 in 4 Americans, that's 24.3%, lives with chronic pain, and 8.5% of Americans have high-impact chronic pain that severely limits their day-to-day life. So this isn't some rare edge case we're talking about. This is a mainstream workforce issue that is actively affecting a massive segment of our population. Which brings us to our final section, number 5, personal or systemic failure. Let's move to and see how this all builds into the broader economic crisis faced by the 99%, because a health crisis doesn't just stay isolated in the body, it bleeds into everything. Housing affordability is severely compromised by lost wages. Household debt spikes dramatically because of those unexpected medical bills. And because you drain your savings just to survive the present moment, wealth accumulation completely stops, which means retirement, that gets permanently delayed. The health crisis is mathematically, undeniably interconnected with the housing and retirement crises. So that leaves us with this final, incredibly vital question. If individual preparation, like Lisa's super responsible $15,000 safety net, is mathematically insufficient to survive the modern cost of recovery, how much longer can we possibly ignore the need for systemic change? Systemic policy changes are absolutely vital to prevent financial ruin from being the default side effect of just getting sick or injured. Because the true cost of recovery isn't just about getting better physically, it's about surviving long enough to rebuild economically. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking the hard questions, and I will see you next time.